Okay, so we are live now and we've got a few people joining. Hello everyone, welcome, good morning, or good afternoon if you're in South Africa.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon everyone.
Okay. So I'm going to give people a couple of minutes to join. We've got about 170 registered for today's session, so it's a nice number. No pressure, lads. Just a quick check. Can you see the title slide? Carl or Willem?
Yep.
Yep, you can. Perfect. Okay, we've got a few more joining as well. I can see a few names that I recognize. Hey guys. Tilana, hello, good morning or good afternoon. Okay. Okay, well, I'll give it another 30 seconds and then we can kick it off.
So this is always the awkward bit for any webinar. So let's kick off a bit of friendly discussion. Willem, what did you have for breakfast this morning?
I had 2 pieces of toast. I was in a bit of a hurry because I'm on my way to go and do a very nice hike, 5-day hike with my daughter. After this, of course.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I feel both lacking in energy, not only because I won't be able to do a hike, but also because I've not had breakfast yet. I'm intermittent fasting, which means I can only eat between 12 and 6. So you've made me feel even more hungry than I was before. Probably the worst question I could have asked. Minzy, how about yourself before we kick off?
Well, I'm also intermittent fasting, but I'm doing the 16/8. So my window started at 10, but I'm also on the low carb diet as well. So I was just saying to Willem earlier that yeah, going running on a low carb diet is very hard. Your body has no energy. So I'm good though.
Awesome. Awesome.
Cool. Okay.
I think we're good to go.
Yeah, I think we are. Yeah. So we've got people and obviously you can join as well. So okay, well, good morning and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today on our online learning day hosted by Practice Ignition. So this is the first of 6 sessions that are going to be run throughout the day. So I hope you've registered for this and some of the others. As always, these sessions are going to be recorded. So if you have registered, you will be able to get a copy of the recording afterwards if you can't actually attend. So this first session, we're going to be talking about how to communicate with clients, and obviously a very, you know, of the moment case is how to communicate remotely. You know, I think we've all had to move into a world that maybe was not very familiar for a lot of people. So we're going to be talking about that and understanding how my fellow participants on this webinar have managed to sort of navigate the river throughout the last year. So very quickly, my name is Richard. I'm an account manager at Practice Ignition. I'm based in Cape Town on a beautiful sunny day on the Atlantic seaboard, looking at Robben Island right now. So I'm very blessed to be here, and I'm very happy to be joined by my two colleagues. Willem, I'm going to call you a colleague as well. We do so much work together. So I'm joined by Carl Reeder, who is our head of accounting for EMEA at Practice Ignition, and Willem Haarhoff, who is a pioneer and a herald, apparently. You can expand on that if you would like. Do you want to do a quick intro, guys?
Yeah, sure. But I just need to make an observation first of all. I mean, Minzy, I loved your profile photo, but Willem, are the barbers closed?
That
is some phenomenal growth that people like me can only dream of. Anyway, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. So as Minzy said, I'm Carl Reeder, head of accounting for EMEA for Practice Ignition. So what that role means is that I don't do the numbers, and that will be a reassurance to all involved, but instead I help Practice Ignition communicate what they do externally, but also, and perhaps more importantly, feedback from what's going on the ground into Practice Ignition, so that they can understand not only what goes on in my practice and the practices that I speak to, but also the wider accounting world. I wear a number of other hats as well. The one that I'll be referring to today primarily is my hat that I wear at D&T. So D&T is a mid-sized firm of accountants. We've got about 2,500, 3,000 clients, and we specialize in looking after franchisors and franchisees. Obviously, over COVID, it's massively disrupted the communications that we can do, which we'll touch on later. So we've had to adapt and be quite nimble with how we maintain relationships, both at volume, but also one-to-one with franchisors. Alongside that, I also serve as chair of the practitioners panel at ACCA. So that means that, again, much like with PI, I serve ACCA by feeding back what's going on the ground in the accounting world, helping them to shape policy and direction for practitioners. I also serve on the policy panel, so I'm involved in lobbying government for things like small business support and anything that can help individuals or businesses to make their tax affairs easier and to make them more financially stable. I serve as a trustee of Young Enterprise and author of Boss It. So I think that's more than enough about me. Willem, over to you.
Thanks, Carl, and good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be part of the session again with the team. I'm the co-founder of the DoughGetters Group, and it is our mission to help our clients and any entrepreneur out there just to get a better handle on their finances, to be in control of it so they can make better decisions, because we know that is ultimately what's going to help them grow their business, make more profit, and ultimately get more cash flow. I also do not a lot of the actual groundwork in terms of day-to-day bookkeeping and accounting, and hence my title, if I can call it that. I'm the one in the team that likes to come up with new ideas, new plans for the future, driving our strategy, and planting some seeds in our own franchise networks, owners' hearts and minds, so that they can follow the lead that we provide. But very excited for today. I think there's a lot of cool stuff we're going to talk about, how we communicate with our clients in these times, how we can be more flexible, and looking forward to this.
Cool, thanks guys. So yeah, the very rough agenda today is looking at adaptability, resilience, what you should be focusing on, I guess, as a business. I think a lot of people have learned a lot over the last 12 months and have probably already made some changes, but it'd be great to hear some of your stories as well. And then what does the future look like, I guess? As with anything, these are free-flowing conversations, so we will try and touch that agenda, but we'll see where it goes. So I guess, just opening up the discussion. The elephant in the room is COVID. It has really changed the landscape completely. So I think a lot of people were probably caught unawares. A lot of people weren't ready to go remote, work from home. Some were very much prepared, I think. I think anyone who was an early adopter of cloud technology was probably in a much stronger position to be able to just pick up and carry on from elsewhere. So I guess, guys, what's your experience been over the last year, and how have you managed to sort of navigate that?
Hey, well, it's been really, really interesting, enlightening, frightening, probably every other emotion that I could think of, actually. So I don't want to hark too much back to the early days of COVID, but I think it's really important just to set the scene, certainly from D&T's perspective. Whilst we used online communication, we weren't an online first business. So we used online tools in our practice. We used online communication with our clients. We were heavy adopters of social media, but look, at heart, certainly with our very high value clients, we were about personal relationships. We were about seeing the whites of the eyeballs. We were about having conversations over red wine rather than a virtual coffee. That's what we were all about. So whilst we had the tools and the ability to communicate with clients and indeed our team remotely, it wasn't embedded within our culture. So we had historically, we'd used email marketing, we'd used social media. Obviously, we'd use phone calls. We didn't really tend to go for video calls in the past, because our belief was that if a meeting justified a video call, then provided the meeting could happen down to geography, we'd try and make it happen face to face. That was just the way that we did it. And we always saw that things like social media, for example, because I think social media is one of the key ways we actually communicate and build relationships. With social media, for example, we actually try to make sure that we only used it as a top up for relationships rather than relying on it too much for opening and building. So we used it to just maintain the bank account, if we think of the emotional bank account, rather than build it up in any way. So yeah, it was really tough. And we heard the announcement in the UK in mid to late March that we were locking down and things had to change. We had to panic, go out, buy some laptops for a couple of our office-based team members and reorganize everything. But actually, despite what I've said so far, I strongly believe that our communication game had increased massively over the month. I think that we learned a lot on the job and we changed and adapted so quickly and so flexibly that actually, I think our clients had a better output. So to give you a very broad outline of what we did, we diversified our online communications. We embraced video calls. We made sure that no team members did what we call buckethead, because, you know, if you speak to somebody and let's just say they have a hat over their face, that's no fun, is it? You know, speaking to a buckethead is no fun. Likewise, listening to somebody like this is no fun. So we made sure that people were comfortable to have their videos on, to be seen, and to try and give them the tools and I guess the emotional strength to be able to do something that was perhaps outside of their comfort zone before. We supplemented that with
you've obviously invested in your office as well, which I always look at your office and your background and think, wow, that's a very good setup.
Yes. So this was a rapid job. We invested in you know, upping our email content game so that we could distribute knowledge-based information by email, but then we tried to focus on one-to-one communications with our client partners, primarily through video call and topping up on the platform that suited them, whether that's WhatsApp, whether that's email, whether that's text message. So it broadened our communication capabilities, and I'm sure we'll go on to discuss where we see that going in the future.
No, absolutely. And I guess in terms of, you know, we're talking about client communications, but you touched on it just now, internal communications as well. It's very important, I think, that people understand, you know, when you're not in the office, you're losing some of that nuance of conversations and you might overhear something that you've got some knowledge on. So how did you have to address that, and how did you address that?
Yeah, sure. So again, we came at it from a very different place than Willem, I would imagine, because Willem, I know from the conversations previously, was remote first. So he's going to tell me what we did wrong. However, internally, you know, we had Microsoft Teams. Previously, we used Slack, and before Slack, we used a tool called Yammer. But the reality was that we never really used them. You know, we were office-based. So why would you type a message when you can just shout across the office and say, "Oh, let's grab a coffee," and just chat through something face to face? So we've used online collaboration tools, but we're learning on the job. And I think that this is where I'm going to learn from Willem during this session about how he structured it, how he's managed it, and how he's developed a culture through that. Because for us, we you know, we feel we've done it, but we're probably, if we were getting an exam at school, we'd be maybe a C-. We're not doing very well. We've put the essential communications on there, but we're still working out and learning and trying to understand how to build that rapport and true culture through an online platform.
Yeah, and it is an ongoing iterative process, like you say. I actually think a C- is not a bad score, actually, based on my educational output. So, Willem, I guess, how does that, you know, chime with what you guys have done, and what have you learned through the process?
Yeah, I must say, from a COVID perspective, the disruption for us, as Carl alluded to, wasn't so much in how we had to change the way in which we worked, because we were already fully remote, you know, since our beginning. The disruption for us was more from a mental well-being perspective. And, you know, I'm not sure if we're going to get to that today. We might not. But it first of all allowed us to do a lot of navel gazing, because it really started to stress test what we have done. And I think I won't be able to overemphasize the fact that this point of communicating in what we know today in a technological or digital space, I don't think anybody can claim to have cracked the nut. Nobody's got a monopoly on knowledge and experience, and it's an ongoing learning process. And for me, the biggest reason why that would be the case is whether you pre, mid, or post-COVID, I actually think that is completely irrelevant. Communication brings to the mix 7+ billion people around the world who are, every single person in the world is unique. There's not one person that's the same. We all have different worldviews, and that alone introduces sufficient complexity in communication, whether it's digital, whether it's handshakes or not. And I think that's where we would like to focus our attention, just from a broader scope, is how do you communicate effectively? The tools that you use is just the facilitation of that communication. And sometimes it might create barriers. Sometimes it might facilitate better what you might have done elsewhere. But we like to think about that communication as a human-to-human interaction, and how can one, improve upon that. I think the other thing that really came out strongly, as I mentioned, is the mental well-being. The stress test of actually now being forced inside your home for an extended period of time, almost getting used to the idea of, well, I can't go anywhere, so I'm not going to go anywhere. Other areas of your life that might be impacted negatively. So I think that was for us the biggest disruptor, was the mental well-being side.
And I think one of the things I was thinking about, there's different types of communication, right? Depending on whether you're doing your marketing, your social media communication, whether it's communication with a new client, whether it's communicating with existing clients about, service changes or whatever it is. But I guess focusing on the, how you engage with people that are new to DoughGetters or D&T, a lot of the face-to-face and the old worlds, it was about building up trust, right? And that's built up through presence, through understanding. You get a feel for somebody. So how, if at all, does that change when it is remote? And how do you go about building up that sort of trust relationship and that trust economy?
Sure. So we've not onboarded a huge number of team members over COVID. I think we've onboarded about 4 or 5. So we've got limited experience, but we do have experience. So I just wanted to caveat my response just on that basis. And look, it is really difficult to perform an induction, not so much from a technical perspective. It's very easy to run through the health and safety regs and the money laundering regs and so on via a video call. In fact, it's easier because you can record it and just rinse and repeat for each new starter. But the real challenge with an induction remotely is truly setting that cultural tone from day one, and setting that vibe so that people understand how the business does things. It's very easy to explain theoretically how you do it, and the nuts and bolts of the systems and processes, and the nuts and bolts of what you must and must not do, and the code of conduct, or whatever it is you're trying to explain. But the sixth sense that we all have about how an organization really works, I think, is very difficult to gauge when you're not present and in there. And we've all had it ourselves. If we think to our back to our client-facing days, or if we are currently client-facing, back to when we could go out and meet clients. Often we would see a set of numbers that would come through on a ledger system. The ledger system looks the same regardless of who the business is. It's just it's just dots and digits all over a page, and we don't really get a feel for the client. And then that the client, I guess the avatar, the understanding of who it is we're dealing with, who we're communicating with, that builds up over time. So we might see their website. So we shape something based on how they've portrayed their business to be. We then hear them on the phone. So we get to know a little bit of a personal side, but it's very guarded because we haven't met them. And it's only when we walk into the shop or into the factory and we can sense how the employees are relating to people. We can sense whether the stock is all nice and orderly or whether it's really messy everywhere. That's when we get a true sense of who it is we're dealing with and how we communicate with them. The same goes for team members joining us. We could send them the same document and it could have a flashy logo at the top and be really well designed, or it could be just knocked out on Microsoft Word with the stock font. They will both give two very different impressions, but the real impression, the truth, is when they actually come into the work environment properly, meet their co-workers, so on and so forth. So what did we do with our team members? We tried to replicate the knowledge-based stuff as early as possible in the process. But we also made sure that as soon as we could, we set up our workspace to be COVID safe. So we've maintained our office premises over COVID. And there's certain government regulations that we've needed to go through to be able to do that. So in terms of protective equipment, in terms of distancing between where people sit, sanitization, arrow stickers on the floor, all of this stuff that we need to do. But what that's allowed us to do is just to make sure that even if it's only for a day or so, new joiners can come into the office and meet a couple of the people. It's under different circumstances, and at any one time in our office, we probably have maximum, I don't know, 6 or 7 people at any one time. It really is bare bones. For our COVID safe, we've gone for 1 person per pod of 6 desks rather than the strict 2 meters. We've tried to be belts and braces with it, and practically that's the easiest way to make it COVID safe. But it just means that people can come in, get a feel for, the tone of voice that people use when they come in and say good morning to everyone. So they can get a feel for where the coffee machine is when things come back to normal. And hopefully that means it won't be such a shock, because our biggest concern was that we could onboard somebody virtually. But when it comes to whatever point we're back to normal, whether it's summer, whether it's winter, whether it's next year, the first day of coming into an office of complete, you imagine walking into an office of someone you've worked for 1.5 years, but it's a sea of new faces that you've never met. It's going to be quite nerve-wracking, probably more nerve-wracking than joining a new business. So we've tried to preempt that fear and reduce that fear as much as we can.
Yeah, that's cool. So Willem, I guess from your side, you've obviously DoughGetters have been on an interesting journey, and that journey is continuing. You're expanding. You've got some franchisees now, so you're spreading the team dough love, put it that way. But how do you? And I'm sure you've learned some things out of that process. But how do you make sure that the communication from each of those entities within the dough group, are talking at the same cadence, with the same message, the same culture? What have you learned in that process?
Yeah, that's a very, very difficult imperative to get right in any business. And I think I want to start off by saying that I personally believe that it's impossible to eliminate physical human-to-human meetings and interaction. And I'm sincerely hoping that's going to come back very soon, because we're always very intentional, whether it's internal meetings, whether it's client meetings, that we relish any opportunity to go and meet somebody physically somewhere, whether it's in their office or any other location, because we don't have our own office, so we always rely on other locations. But to speak to your question, I think there's 2 very important ingredients to answer that question. The first one is my belief that nothing trumps open and honest communication all the time, and you can apply that principle in whatever setting. We've got a saying in our team, no holy cows, and I hope that doesn't offend anybody. It's not meant that way, but there's nothing in our organization that cannot be put on the table by anyone to be discussed. I mean, from a structure perspective, we've got a very flat structure. So we don't like to think of ourselves as that's the boss and that's the worker. We don't operate like that. So that's already part of our culture, is the way in which we structured and how we relate to one another. Obviously, from a functional perspective, there is somebody with who the buck's going to stop. We understand that, but that's functional. That's in the day-to-day execution of activities. But relationally, we operate in a very flat structure. So we always welcome any kind of question, any point for discussion, because nobody in our team has the answer to everything. I think that's the key component to getting that culture right. The second aspect is the whole idea of having a mission statement. Now, this is dangerous ground potentially, because it's something which I believe the corporate world managed to really mess up. There's stronger language I can use, but it's that typical, you spend 3 days in a retreat, everybody gives their ideas on a flip chart, and you craft this beautifully written mission statement that's 2-3 sentences long. It's very aspirational, and the moment you leave, nobody can remember what it is. Yeah. And then somebody goes and that put it on a wall. Nobody pays attention to it because it's not done right. Now, I'm not holding myself out to be the master of mission statements, but one thing that I do know, and David Rawlinson, I think, is joining us today. He's put a comment in there saying no lightsabers today, Willem. And that's a reference to a meeting I attended yesterday where I used Star Wars as an analogy. And I want to go back to that if you'll allow me.
Please,
When you watch Star Wars, from the very first scene, something is extremely clear in that movie. This whole movie is about good overcoming evil. And the main character, Luke Skywalker, he's on a mission to overcome the evil empire. There's no ambiguity about that. Everybody knows that's the mission. And I believe in any business, one's got to be able to identify and come up with a mission that's as clear as that. There must be absolutely no uncertainty. Every single person must know what that mission is. That's the only way in which one can unify a team, whether you sit remotely or not. You have to unify around a common cause that's got some aspirations in it. It's going to solve some, universal injustice. That's what it's all about. And the only way people are going to remember it is by repeating it as often as you can. Just like marketing, mission statements, marketing, all that stuff is an exercise in repetition. And so what we do internally is we have as many meetings as possible, and those meetings always start with, what is our mission? And we don't go and say, everybody, our mission statement is, no, it's common street language that we weave into everything we do, everything we discuss. It always comes through. And I believe those two things, open and honest communication and a very clear, concise, easy to understand mission statement that you repeat all the time.
Oh, Willem, you have smashed it with that answer. And I just want to cover that off with a couple of quotes as well. But hopefully, if anybody takes anything from this session, you'll use these quotes and keep them within your business. So the first one is a quote from a guy called Tony Robbins. Now, I'm not sure if many people know who Tony Robbins is. He's an American motivational speaker and author. And one of his favorite quotes is, repetition is the key to mastery. How do I know it? He said it 100 times. So that's the first thing. The second thing is a quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't know the exact wording of the quote, but it's from one of the founders of LinkedIn. And that is that by the time you are bored of saying something, other people are only just starting to hear it. We often underestimate the amount of communication needed for a message to drill home, whether that's with our team, whether it's with our clients. We often think that we say something once and once is enough, but actually there is so much noise in our world. And I would ask the attendees to be very honest with themselves right now. How many times have they checked their emails during this webinar? How many times have they, gone through the loop that we all go through? Let's be honest. We've all gone through the social media loop in the evening of picking up our phone and opening up Facebook and then closing it, and then Twitter, then closing it, then Instagram, then LinkedIn, and then back to Facebook again in case something's changed in the 3 minutes. We all do it. And we have so much noise in our lives. But actually, for a message to penetrate and to be truly understood emotionally, it needs to be heard a whole lot more than once. There was an old saying that the key to marketing was to have 7 or 9 touch points, I believe. That's in the old days. That's when people were reading newspapers and seeing billboards and going out. Nowadays, I believe that actually we need to be so much stronger than that. I think of a brand that has been continually remarketing me on Instagram. So for those that don't know what the term remarketing means, it's those poxy adverts that crop up everywhere you go on the internet. And it feels like this brand has remarketed to me about 10 or 11 times. Reality, they've probably been there each and every time I've opened the app. Every time I've gone through that repetitive cycle of going through different apps and checking emails, I've probably seen them thousands of times, not 10 times. But we really can't underestimate. If you've got something important to say and your mission, your vision, your values, your culture is truly important for both your team and your clients, you need to say it over and over again.
So I think, sorry, Richard, the trick with that is, and first of all, again, I want to say that we haven't mastered it. It's an ongoing journey. We're continuously learning and fine-tuning it. But the trick is, if you get it right, that is the thing that's going to motivate your team to want to get up in the morning, because they know what the mission is. They know the problems we're going to solve out there. They know what impact that's going to have philosophically in the world in terms of making it a better place. That's why people get up in the morning. That's why they give it their all when they do their work. Again, it doesn't matter where you sit, but that's what's driving us and unifying us against, you know, what we want to achieve. No,
that's interesting. And Carl, just to go back to your second paraphrased quote, I can't remember it, unfortunately, but you know, you need to keep repeating the message and get it out there, because, you know, it's on the, you know, when you're, I think, you know, when you're bored of saying it, that's when people hear it, or something like that. So
it's roughly along that lines, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And then, but so when does communication become too much? So, you know, when does sending all these emails out with marketing or outreach and stuff, when does it become spam? Where's the balance, and how do you sort of navigate that world?
Okay, so again, this is just my personal opinion, and I think everybody will have their own views on it. Some people believe that one cold email message is spam and should be reported and burn in hell, and there's others who you know, they just tolerate junk email coming in every hour and they ignore it, but they have a tolerance to it. So we all have our own level of comfort about communication levels, and look, there is a realistic amount. What the differentiation that I want to put in here before going into, I guess, the detail of how much we should do, is we need to look at where the value is in the equation, because the problem with your question, Minzy, is if I was to answer it directly, I could give a very token answer of once per day. Right. However, what I've not done is I've not split and separated between spam and something that's truly valuable. You know, if the National Lottery contacted me every hour to say that I've won £10, I'm going to welcome it. I want them to contact me every minute and say I've won £10, because that number's going to add up. There's an inherent value to that communication. You know, that's the kind of message I want to receive. Sorry?
The content is key then, really.
The content, but more importantly, where the value sits. And one of the things that we get confused with, if the lottery tell me I've won the lottery, the value sits with me, not them, because they're giving me pounds, shillings, and pence.
Okay. Yeah.
As advisors, as suppliers, sometimes we confuse where the value sits. And sometimes what's valuable to us to communicate isn't necessarily valuable for our clients to receive. So we need to take a real long, hard look at the communications that we're having. If we're talking about email or other volume mass marketing, and we need to understand that, does this truly benefit our client? Does it truly add something to them, or is it promoting our services? Is it helping us achieve our goals rather than helping them achieve their goals? Now, clearly, the golden rule of where we all want to get to is alignment on that. We want whatever benefits us to benefit our clients as well. But the reality is that we often don't view things in the same way that our clients do. How can we overcome that? How can we make our communications more valuable? Ask our clients. Ask them what they want from us. Ask them what content they want to receive. Once we know that, we can then ask a very simple question: how often do you want to receive it? But I think that's a really long-winded way of saying there's no one size fits all. And in terms of how much we repeat and how much we offer, we need to look at where the value equation is, and that should steer us towards how much and also what method we communicate it with. The challenge with emails, I mean, we touched on emails being spam, and that's generally my view. I've been through a few years without really checking emails, and it's been the best few years of my life. I don't think that's a coincidence. The challenge with emails is that email communications as a platform has been dragged down to the lowest common denominator by people just using but then abusing email marketing. In the UK, we've got regulation against it now, and it's all a bit of a minefield. So I would also ask the question about the channel that's used. And if email is believed to be the correct channel, we have to question if there actually is value, and how do we make it valuable, and how do we make it compelling enough to open? So yeah, a really long-winded answer to a very simple question, Minzy.
Well, I like to ask simple questions, and a long-winded answer is good, so don't worry. And Willem, I guess from your side, there are obviously multiple channels of communication these days, right? Social media, even WhatsApp, so many different ways that you can communicate. So what have you guys done at DoughGetters to, I guess, think about how you communicate, whether it is directly or whether it's through some kind of marketing channel like I don't know, Facebook or LinkedIn? How do you guys approach that?
Yeah, thanks. Look, personally, I'm a minimalist at heart, and I try to keep things in all aspects as simple and as straightforward as possible. So from that perspective, when we communicate, we always want to be very clear about the content, the key message we want to get across. And I want to just latch on to something that Carl said, which is, where does the value sit in your communication? For me, that's an absolutely fundamental question. As accountants, and this is a gross generalization, so, put on the shoe if it fits. As accountants, I think many times we've done a great job positioning ourselves as what I would like to refer to as the hero in the story. We think of ourselves as we're doing our clients a favor by being their accountants, by doing them, doing their work the way we do it. And I think one has got to flip that on its head. The clients are actually what matters. It's the client that is the hero in the story. If the client is not there, then we are not there. So if we look at it that way, why would I want to bombard the client with content which in most of the times might just be talking more about myself as the accountant? Why would I want to do that? And a simple analogy for that is if you go think back to your school days, I don't know, whether you were the jock or not, or the schoolyard bully or not, but think about the person in school that was the high achiever, the best in sports, and maybe also even a bully. And that was the person who always spoke about themselves, how well they did in sports, how fast they can run, how many distinctions they had, and when they finish, whatever the case might be. And if you think about it, that's somewhat tone deaf, because most people actually don't want to hear that. It doesn't add any value to their lives. As opposed to the person who's always concerned about the other people. How can they help people who's around them? How can they add value to their lives? And so I think it's a fundamental shift in how you view yourself in that relationship, that client-advisor relationship. So what we do at DoughGetters, philosophically, we position our clients as the hero in the story. Please allow me to go back to Star Wars. Luke Skywalker, if it wasn't for him, the evil empire wouldn't have been overcome. How do we fit into the picture? Well, I like to think of ourselves as Yoda or Obi-Wan Kenobi. They're legends in their own right. But Star Wars was not about Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda. It's about Luke Skywalker. Obi-Wan and Yoda had just as much powers as Luke Skywalker, if not more, but they helped Luke Skywalker navigate his way through all the drama, all the conflict, so that he could eventually overcome the evil empire. That's how we see ourselves. And I think with that in mind, we're very careful how we communicate with our clients as much as possible. We only push stuff through if we believe it's going to add value to them in their decision-making, how they move forward, so that they can ultimately win. Because if our clients win, then we win. So again, sorry, I also gave you a very long-winded answer and perhaps not as practical, but I think we can't be practical unless we get to the philosophical side and get that right first.
Absolutely. And Willem, I'm going to pick that up and run with it just ever so slightly based on a question that's come in from Cindy as well. So Cindy has just mentioned about her communications, but she's been trying to provide clients with targeted information around COVID. So in the UK, we've had furlough schemes, we've had loans, we've had grants and so on. But in the past few weeks, she's discovered that there's info fatigue and that the comms have proved counterproductive. And that is the perfect example where, let's be honest, we're all probably suffering from info fatigue ourselves. If we look within ourselves, yes, we like to put the brave story on about we know what's going on and we've got this and we understand the government regulations, but they're changing every week and we've got info fatigue too. What I would say is that for me, that would indicate that there's possibly an opportunity for changing the method of communication, because this stuff is intrinsically valuable to the end client. There clearly is something. So let's say for grants, if you've got any businesses that can benefit from specific hospitality grants, for example, this is the perfect time to, rather than send an email, to pick up the phone and do what no other accountant is doing for them. But Willem, the bit that I wanted to go back to, if I can, you touched on the need for empathy and not being the hero of a story. And I think it's really important, whether dealing with colleagues, but also clients, to understand the mental state that everybody's in. And we touched on that earlier, but we didn't really cover it off. I think that we as a society, clearly we're going through an unprecedented thing in our lifetimes. And I know this because my wife's granddad is in his early 90s. He was too young to be called up for World War II. And we were discussing how it's a real shame that this might be, he's been vaccinated, thankfully, but this could very well be his last experience on Earth, is going through the COVID challenges. Whether or not he catches COVID, age is working against him. And we were discussing about how bad that was, but it was a realization that this really is a once in a lifetime thing. And most of the people we're dealing with are younger than 90. I'd like to make I'll be quite happy making that bet that our client base, our colleagues and so on, haven't been through World War II. And in turn, this is the first major disruption that they've had in their life, unless they've, perhaps come from sort of the former Yugoslavia or so on. So from that perspective, I think that we need to be really empathetic to the fact that this is the first public health crisis that they've encountered. It's quite possibly the first time they've been asked to stay at home for a year or so. Their social, their level of being tuned in socially is going to have changed. They might be nervous just speaking to people. They might be suffering from Zoom fatigue. They might, they might be nervous if you call them on the phone, because we've all been so used to video calls now. Who phones people on a mobile phone anymore? So I think that we need to be very conscious of the other side of the equation, the place that they're in. Combine that with the economic struggles that 99% of people are going through. No business has come through this unscathed. We've not all shut our doors, but we've all got bumps and bruises through it. And I think that means the end result is we need to be that supporting cast character, not the bully. It's not our place to be the hero of this communication. Instead, it's our place to lift them up, give them the leg up, support where we can in the way that they want the support. And our benefit from that might come down the line. It might not be an immediate benefit, but that's, for most of us, is what we got into this profession for, is to truly help our clients and serve them. And we don't serve them by being the hero of that story.
So leave the ego at home, basically.
Which is difficult for me, I'm going to add. I do love the sound of my own voice. It's difficult for me, but it is what we all need to make a conscious effort just to ramp it down slightly.
It's funny because I did a webinar a couple of weeks ago on client experience, and one part of that came out of the discussion was, just simply pick up the phone. We use all these tools, all these channels to communicate, and like you say, sometimes it's too much. As Cindy alluded to, they feel like there's info overload, info fatigue. Just pick up the phone, and just have that 5-minute chat. Sometimes that's all you need, right?
Definitely. And I think there's a huge value. Again, if we go back to the value equation of where does the value in the communication sit? Is it with you or is it with client? There's a huge value if you get the opportunity. And I acknowledge everyone is stressed out of their minds and very busy with the constantly changing environment. But picking up the phone and saying, how are you? With no agenda, no vested interest, but just genuinely to understand where your client's at. I know that I've done it personally, and whilst I haven't been client facing for some time, I have picked up the phone to some clients and said, look, we've not spoken for a long time. How are you? And there's been a range of answers. I won't share them, but it's been on all ends of a spectrum. And lockdown has magnified the fact that whilst we're more connected than ever before to notional connections, we're actually less connected than we've ever been before. So there is also that place just for the genuine, heartfelt conversation with no sale, with no service, no upsell, no extra work order, none of that stuff. just a genuine "how are you?" It works wonders.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've got about 5 minutes left. Willem and Carl, do you want to put your future gazing hats on and maybe think about where we're going? And I guess, you know, the UK looks like it's going to be out of lockdown in 4 months, which is a hallelujah moment. I'm sure the pubs are going to be very busy on the 21st. You know, do people go down back into go to the office and communicate and have face-to-face meetings? What does the future look like, I guess?
Look, I wish I had a crystal ball. I might have been in a different place and position today if that was the case. But I want to pick up on the Second World War and point that Carl raised, and I try to put myself back in the shoes of those people when the first bombs dropped. What would they have thought? You know, happening right in front of their eyes at the moment. They would have had no idea how long it's going to carry on for. There was absolute chaos and uncertainty. And I don't want to equate COVID with that, but I think there are some similarities in saying, well, nobody really knows
many times
what's gonna happen. And so my heart is that I think it's probably not going to be exactly the same as it was before COVID, but I am convinced that just because of the strong urge of humans to want to be connected, we're going to go back to a place where things will get normal again. We will be able to have meetings the way we had them before, you know, barring a few changes. But I wouldn't want to believe for 1 minute that what we're experiencing now is the new normal. I don't buy it for 1 minute, and I think things will get better.
I agree 110%. I think that we had the initial, I guess, surge of, I don't want to say optimism, that's not the right word for it, but the surge of prediction that this might be the way that we do things, and we might no longer have to pay for rent and all of this stuff, and we could all work at home. But we realized pretty quickly on that that's not sustainable. We are societal beings, and I'm going to fall back on the repetition is the key to mastery excuse, because I know I give this example several times, but I'm hoping that you haven't truly taken it in before and you'll benefit from it again. I often talk about Starbucks and the reason why they write people's names on cups, and it's not to misspell the names, it's because they know that they might be the only person who asks the customer what their name is and how they are that day. So they had actually embraced the fact that we are societal beings and we're living in a more automated world. Because before COVID, we were moving towards a stay-at-home economy. My prediction, but it is only a crystal ball prediction, and it's just hope it's where partly hope and partly prediction. I believe that the societal urge to connect with each other will actually become stronger than ever before. And I think that'll be partly made up by the change of demographic in our high streets to become more experience-led and societal-led rather than retail. I think that it will be driven by the fact that we've all spent a year indoors itching to get out and enjoy some of the simple pleasures. And also because it's just human nature to get to know each other. But commercially, this makes sense for us as well, because we as practice owners cannot compete with automation, stacking it high, selling it cheap. Very generally speaking, there's always somebody with better tech than us and more money than us. So actually what we need to be doing is making sure that we put the human relationship and the interpersonal skills at the forefront of all of our client interactions. And trust me, our clients will lap it up. That's what they want from us. They need to know that we're there for them.
Yeah, I agree. Like you say, it's the high volume businesses generally don't have that sort of, I guess, that personal element, and you kind of lose that, I guess, that unique selling point. So, Willem, any final thoughts?
I think from my side, I want to go back to the one point I made is, when you communicate, try and make it as open, honest as possible. I think people want honesty, authenticity. Nobody wants to hear somebody just say stuff for the sake of saying it. It's off-putting.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think people can see through. See, when you're not being honest, they can see through that very quickly, and you're on the back foot straight away. So, listen, guys, I think we've reached the end. Interesting conversation. Some great quotes there as well, and I love the Star Wars metaphor. I might use that one day in a future webinar as well. So I don't think we have any questions from the audience. So I think we'll call that a wrap. So guys, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts and your insights. I really appreciate it. And everyone who joined, thank you so much. Recordings will be shared after the event. And if you are joining some of the other 5 events for today, I hope you enjoy them and get the most out of them. So thanks everyone for joining.
Wonderful. Thank you everybody.